Playing offensive line is easily one of the most underappreciated roles in all of professional sports. In many ways, it's all guts and no glory. And really, only the elite of the elite offensive linemen get any positive recognition. Otherwise, they are only highlighted if an opposing pass rusher burns them off the line, hits them with a nasty swim move, or if they get tagged with a holding call. The amount of personal sacrifices these guys make is insane. Obviously, they are fairly well compensated, especially when you compare it to what normal people make. But for the work they are doing and how important the offensive line is to the success of an offense, boy do they deserve it. It isn't that these guys are just sacrificing their well-being on Sundays, which, by the way, for all of you who haven't actually played in the trenches, it's said to be grueling. It's banging knees, jamming fingers, smashing skulls, and often even worse. I mean, how many times have we seen an offensive lineman blow out his knee after getting rolled up on? And if the health concerns from repeatedly ramming into the absolute units that make up the opposing defensive lines weren't enough, most people don't realize that staying over 300 pounds, which is all but a requirement for NFL offensive linemen in the modern game, is not a natural thing for a lot of these guys. Linemen are often unfairly stereotyped as athletes who have poor eating habits. Of course, they are mountains of men, but just because you stand a broad 6 foot 6 inches doesn't mean that you are meant to carry an extra spare tire on your torso. More often than not, these guys ended up needing to shovel home an uncomfortable amount of food, way more than they naturally would, just to maintain the weight that they are at. I think you'd be surprised to realize how many of the offensive linemen at the NFL level are forced to meet outrageous caloric intakes in order to stay bulky enough to protect their quarterback and pave holes for their running back. And what is even scarier for many of these guys is that as impressive as their athletic prowess at that size is, it definitely does not make them immune to the ancillary health risks that come with being so large. This is exactly why we see most offensive linemen go one of two ways when they retire. Either they lose weight or they ended up embattled with serious health issues. There is, however, one former All-Pro offensive lineman, former Cleveland Browns martyr Joe Thomas, who has in his own way bucked the trend and gotten absolutely jacked in retirement. During his time in Cleveland, Thomas was the consummate professional, enduring an eternity of abysmal teams while racking up Pro Bowl and All-Pro honors, 10 and 9 respectively, to be exact. The guy's list of accomplishments just goes on, and I suppose it shouldn't be a surprise that when it came time to tackle the next phase of his life, he has attacked it with the same dedication to excellence that he brought to every detail of his NFL career. Nowadays, Thomas, who when he retired weighed upwards of 315 pounds, is looking shredded, and I'm not saying shredded for an O-lineman. There are zero qualifiers here, just plain old shredded. While this transformation is something he reportedly started pursuing shortly after retiring at the conclusion of the 2017 NFL season, it didn't become a viral sensation until he and his former teammate, Andrew Hawkins, started the podcast together, The Tomahawk Show. And a couple of tweets that featured pictures of Thomas's new physique set the internet on fire. The pictures received an insane amount of engagement, both from fans who were pining for Thomas to take his new sculpted frame back to the field for the Browns, and from former players, some of who were envious of Thomas's regimented approach at his help, and others, like former teammate Myles Garrett, who were simply poking a little bit of fun at the chiseled lineman. While there are a litany of reasons that us normal folk put off going to the gym, going for a run, or eating healthy, Thomas explained that losing weight was literally the first thing he wanted to do after retiring, telling NFL Network, "I was more eager to lose weight than almost anything in retirement," which is understandable considering the fact that Thomas is one of those guys who had to earn every single one of those pounds he carried to the gridiron on Sundays. He wasn't alone in the struggle though, not by a long shot. Most of the offensive linemen in the NFL are having an excess of 5,000 calories per day, and in Thomas's case it was usually closer to 7,000 calories a day. He explained to Men's Health just how daunting the whole process was for him. Most guys feared weigh-in days because if they were too heavy, they'd get fined. For me, I feared weighing in too light and that the coach would chew me up. It was stressful because if I went 2 hours without eating a Thanksgiving meal, I knew I was losing weight. So I was the guy that was always sitting at the table cleaning everybody else's plates. I would always order a few appetizers and a couple entrees for myself and then dessert. And then when I would finish my wife's and everybody else's meals, they found it amusing, but it was also stressful. If I went 2 hours without food, I could have eaten somebody's arm. I was starving. I was probably not a fun person to be around. Yeah, doesn't exactly seem like the most enjoyable way to live life, does it? It wasn't just the stress of maintaining the weight that wore on Thomas as his career lingered on, but the side effects of such a grueling diet. He dealt with chronic heartburn because of the crazy amounts of carbs and sugar he was eating and suffered from sleep apnea. His wife said he would even stop breathing in the middle of the night sometimes. It is genuinely upsetting to think about how uncomfortable he was day in and day out. And while it may be hard to imagine that it took so much effort for Thomas to stay at his playing weight, some context about his physique during the early years of his football career and what he had to do to gain weight might help paint a clearer picture. When Thomas got to the University of Wisconsin in the summer before his freshman year, he was just 250 pounds. That sounds huge, but in the context of offensive linemen, that just isn't going to cut it. To play offensive line well at a high level, you simply need the mass. It makes it harder for the opposition to move you off your spot, and it can help a player truly become elite if they can add mass at a faster rate and they lose their explosiveness and speed. Determined to make an impact at the next level, Thomas committed to his bulk, and in addition to the 3 square meals he would typically eat, he was also eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich every 30 minutes. He says that he was going through an entire loaf of bread every day. On top of that, he would drink an entire carton of creamer each day. That was around 1,000 calories and mostly of fat. And even that wasn't enough for Thomas to ensure he was bulking up at the pace he wanted to.
You ate a whole wheel of cheese? How'd you do that? It's actually, I'm not even mad. That's amazing.
So he would chug at least one 30-ounce glass of whole milk right before bed with his last sandwich of the day. I don't know about you, but that sounds exhausting to me. Despite all the discomfort he endured living the every meal you can eat until that Thanksgiving going to burst feeling, as he described it, it worked. And by December of his freshman year, he had ballooned up from 250 pounds to 280. And each year after that, he'd tack on about 10 more pounds until he got to about 315, where he would play the majority of his NFL career. Now, that is not to say that the big fella doesn't still get down and dirty with a cheap meal every now and again. He posted some videos on Twitter before and after his Thanksgiving dinner and joked he might need to take a break from eating afterwards after the scale showed he put on a little over 12 pounds. It wasn't just that Thomas wanted to have a new, svelte figure that he could flaunt as he meandered down the beach. After all, the former University of Wisconsin standout does still live in the Badger State where he grew up. The truth is, during the last few seasons of Thomas's amazing NFL career, the offensive lineman was plagued by injuries. And not just the big ones like the torn triceps that ultimately broke his consecutive snap streak and pushed him further towards retirement. He also dealt with a variety of nagging injuries, many of which were at least in part related to or exacerbated by his weight. Every day, Thomas had to drag himself to practice with arthritis building up, aching knees, and an ailing back.
My back! No, my back, cops! My back!
To the point that he was steadfastly popping some sort of anti-inflammatory or medicine to deal with the pain, something he now realizes was related to his diet. Let's take a look at what a typical day of eating looked like for Thomas during his time in the NFL. For breakfast, it was a bowl of oatmeal, some Greek yogurt, usually with berries, granola, flaxseed, and honey, and then enough eggs and bacon to bankrupt your local IHOP. He'd supplement the meal with a high-calorie snack, either beef jerky or a smoothie, before having a big lunch that often included a hamburger with, as he describes it, all the fixins plus French fries. Then it was off to practice, that is, if his joints were feeling up to it that particular day. Afterwards, it was back to the kitchen in a big way. For dinner, it wasn't uncommon for him to eat an entire pan or 2,000 calories worth of lasagna. Finally, before bed, it was a sleeve of Girl Scout cookies and ice cream or a frozen pizza, and of course a big protein shake with milk. I feel just full verbalizing that mammoth diet. Since retiring, he has had his blood work done with 2 different doctors to determine if he had food sensitivities that were affecting him in a negative manner. He did so after one of the Browns' new dietitians suggested that all of the sugar and carbohydrates may have been contributing to all of the inflammation and soreness. Thomas said that across the board, all of the doctors he saw and the tests they ran confirmed this notion, and he is happy to report that in retirement, he can move much more freely without the constant aches and pains that plagued him when he was shackled to his insane dietary requirements. Although Thomas made it clear that he wasn't one of those guys that was naturally huge, that doesn't mean that all he had to do was start eating like a normal person and all of a sudden he turned into Thor. Thomas also explained that although the first 20 to 30 pounds did just kind of fall off as he shifted into a non-NFL diet, it was still up to him to take it to the next level. Thomas leveraged 2 primary concepts to shred up. He sticks to a keto or low-carb, low-sugar diet during the week and practices intermittent fasting, meaning he only eats during a specific time window each day. On top of all the dietary focus, he is still in the gym grinding day in and day out, lifting multiple days a week. And for cardio, he swears by swimming and yoga, as they are both easy on the joints and a killer workout. I'm sure it helps that he built a pretty monstrous foundation of muscle during his NFL career, but still, Joe Thomas's transformation can't be overstated. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to click that subscribe button down below for more cool videos every single day. If you like the video, then like the video. We'd really appreciate it. And last but not least, don't forget to tune in to TPS every single day for more cool videos. We'll see you next time.